This is the Clean Clothes, where we talk real estate with a little special sauce. This week, industry lawyers are getting more listings than agents. Compass says Zillow's new policies are quashing competition. Zillow fires back, calling Chicago's private listing network a hidden listing scheme. A huge op-ed dropped challenging NAR, sparking online celebration. A watchdog firm cries that real estate agents' commissions aren't coming down. Oh no? Hey, real estate industry, are you okay? Because whether it's courtrooms, commissions, or consolidations, it's looking a little bit like a mud wrestling competition out there. Let's get dirty. The portal war continues with Compass versus Zillow. Compass has officially accused Zillow of quashing competition. The issue, as it always is Zillow's private listing ban. But you know how that goes. If a property is listed on a private listing network, Zillow has the right to keep it off of their platform. So says Zillow. Compass argues the move locks independents and boutique firms out of the marketplace. Wait, that is so cute. Okay, that Zillow is no longer a neutral platform. It's a competitor deciding who gets to play. I'm going to just stop right there for a second. I don't know when anybody thought Zillow was neutral, probably before it got its brokerage license and was actually employing real estate agents to sell real estate and becoming an actual competitor to the brokerages. So the idea of Zillow being like a service that's included in our MLS or has any obligation to us beyond the restrictions of their licensing is stupid. It's just stupid. And I find it really kind of rich that Compass would even make this accusation because Compass's private listing network locks people out of competition too. So anyway, there are a few things about this. There are a couple stories on it. Compass added to its lawsuit against Zillow, which alleges anti-competitive behavior and collusion, according to the Real Deal story. Compass cites Zillow's own statistics showing 90% agent compliance with its listing policy. Well, yeah, because any smart seller knows they want their listing listed on Zillow. It is the number one place that home buyers go to search for listings. So it would be foolish to not follow the policy if you want your listing to be on Zillow. All right, so in a filing last week, the residential giant offered more evidence that it says supports its allegation that Zillow has engaged in anti-competitive behavior and collusion in an effort to prevent homes from being marketed off its platform. But isn't that the point? I mean, isn't that the point of clear cooperation and mandatory entry in the MLS? It was to make sure that everybody had access to all of the listings, that all of the listings are in the same portal. It was supposed to, make it a level playing field. But it was Compass that exploited that little loophole that allowed them to create the private listing network in the first place, which I find to be quite anti-competitive and personally experienced. So I think this is really rich. Anyway, Compass says that Zillow has a monopolistic stranglehold on the market. No, they just have a search platform that a lot of buyers really love using. So, it's as simple as that. They were an excellent search portal that turned into a brokerage and became a competitor with other brokerages. And now they're rewriting the rules, just like Compass had its private listing network, giving it a competitive advantage over its competitors. Now Zillow just wants as many listings as possible on its platform. I can see why that makes sense. Okay, the brief claims that in the days following updating its listing policy, Zillow's executives bragged that they had successfully stopped other brokerages from publicly marketing listings. So let me get this straight. Compass, who is fighting other wars for its 3-phase marketing plan, which explicitly involves taking listings off of public websites, right, is accusing Zillow of stopping other brokerages from publicly marketing listings? I mean, is it just me? Is it just me? Does that sound like truly hypocritical? It's almost like politics right now. It's like, Democrats are like, Republicans are shutting down the government. Republicans are like, Democrats have voted to keep the government closed 15 times. They're both blaming each other, but they're doing the same thing. It's insanity. Okay, the brief claims that those homeowners are being harmed by Zillow's listing policy as it forces agents to list homes on Zillow or risk being fired. No, it forces agents to list listings in the MLS, which then pulls in to the Zillow feed. That was the point of clear cooperation policy. That was the point. It's not Zillow making these rules, it's NAR. NAR is the one that said we have to put our listings into the MLS within 1 day. I also think this part is crazy. Okay, as it forces agents to list homes on Zillow or risk being fired. No. Whenever you go on a listing presentation, you talk about your marketing strategy with your client, and your client signs the listing agreement. So if you discussed this off-market option with your client, they decide to choose to do that, and you explain to them that there are now platforms that are not allowing privately listed homes to be listed on their sites, and the seller still signs the listing agreement, then what's the risk of being fired? Here's just one other quote from this. Zillow's ability to successfully force agents and home sellers to market homes on Zillow from the beginning, when home sellers previously chose to begin by marketing those homes off of Zillow. No. Your seller chose to market the home off of the market. Therefore, Zillow and Trulia and Homes.com and Redfin and all the other sites shows the power of its monopoly and conspiracy with Redfin. I'm sorry. I just find holes all over this thing. Wait, there's more. This is another really rich part. I couldn't even with this. Through this method, the brokerage claimed in its brief, Zillow is pushing agents to force home sellers to put their listings on Zillow. Okay, instead of Zillow trying to attract those listings by competing with differentiated home marketing products and offerings for home sellers. You know, Zillow's product, this is from the Inman article, Zillow's product is its platform. It is its exposure. It is its popularity. So what needs to be differentiated? The reality is home sellers want their homes listed on Zillow. They want them listed on Zillow. Compass further alleged that Zillow MLSs were two monopolies that mutually reinforced each other. Let's just walk this back for a second. MLS, the multiple listing service, was designed as a marketplace for people selling homes to attract clients of buyers, agents, right, to see their property and offer a cooperating commission, right? This was a marketplace. Now with the new structure, it is a place where we can still market our properties, but we don't post the pre-negotiated or pre-offered buyer agency commission. Fine. But the MLS's point is to create a place where we can see everything that's on the market, have accurate data, even though again it has weaknesses there, but have some accurate data so we can give good pricing guidance. Even with this happening like more frequently in our market right now with the private listings, you see a lot of off-market sales that do not get entered into the MLS, and that skews our data. There are implications of this, whatever it is that Compass is looking for, really damaging the source that's not just for Compass. I'm sorry, the MLS wasn't created for you, Compass. It's created for the industry, for all of us, and it needs fixes. I agree. But the idea that it's conspiring with Zillow, it's conspiring with Zillow no more than it's conspiring with any other platform that showcases houses, or I would also say by enforcing NAR's policies. So the real beef should be with NAR. Anyway, the brief also alleges that Zillow is effectively trying to serve as an industry regulatory agency when it is not one. And the brokerage cited previous antitrust cases against NAR, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Meta. Okay, according to the brief, those cases showed that dominant platforms cannot punish users for using an alternative platform. This is ridiculous. The industry itself should have regulated this private listing network thing a long time ago. It is NAR's failed policy that even created this private listing network that Compass is hanging its hat on and dying on the hill for. And in my humble opinion, I gave a round of applause to Zillow when they did this because NAR couldn't do it. NAR wouldn't do it. I had a call with them. They said they couldn't do it. So, you know, Zillow as a company should have the right to, in my opinion, make this rule. And if you don't like it and you don't want your listings on Zillow, then keep them off Zillow. It's not rocket science. You don't have a right to Zillow. You don't have a right to anything. Just like we don't have a right to your private listing network. Just like that. Same thing. That's what I think. Anyway, so to me, the hypocrisy in this and the audacity of it is insanity. It's insanity. And I even had an agent send me an internal email from another brokerage, okay? It's her old brokerage, with a draft letter to the Department of Justice, okay, pledging support for Compass in this case, and encouraging agents to send this letter. And I'm like, when is this? How is Compass out here in the streets, recruiting brokers to try and advance their agenda here? Just curious. I can't believe that there is a company that is privately listing a solid number of its listings and is just acquired anywhere and is going to be, a substantial portion of the U.S. real estate market, right? With its private listing network, which we talked about last week, saying that all their affiliates, all their franchises, everybody's going to have options, right, to sell the house as the seller would like it to be sold, right? Accusing Zillow of wanting to not publicly market listings. I mean, it's just a little bit flawed logic there. Somebody prove me wrong. Somebody prove me wrong. I want you to prove me wrong, because to me, this is just nonsense. It's just total nonsense. Total nonsense. Zillow versus Chicago's private listing network. Zillow isn't just fighting that war, but they're also moving on to play offense against other private listing networks, including this Midwest real estate data, MRED. On November 3rd, Inman reported that MRED is firing back against rumors that their listings will be excluded from Zillow. Zillow called Chicago's private listing network a hidden listing scheme. Sounds saucy. They say it hides homes from the public market. Yes, that's what a private listing network would do. Skews inventory and gives insiders an unfair advantage. Well, of course. That's the point. That is the point, right? Of a private listing network. That's the point? Yeah, okay. MRED was created 9 years ago, says the article, and obtains seller permission to put listings in the private listing network via an addendum that states that the buyer group each listing will reach will be smaller. Quote, as a result, a seller may not obtain the maximum price or optimum terms for the sale of the seller's real estate. That's a quote from the draft of the addendum that private listing sellers sign. Okay, let's read that again. Seller may not obtain the maximum price or optimal terms for the sale of seller's real estate. That's what a seller is signing. This is the right that Refkin's fighting for. Fighting for a seller to somehow convince themselves or be convinced that they may not obtain a maximum price or optimal terms for the sale. I mean, this particular quote is from MRED, but it's the same concept, isn't it? Who would want that? What seller chooses, right? Seller choice, that's what he's saying, a marketing strategy where you have to disclose that it may not get you the maximum sales price or the best terms. I mean, who wouldn't want to sell for less with worse terms? I mean, come on, it's a no-brainer. Sellers who agree to that marketing strategy sign a disclosure, this is for Compass, that informs them that by marketing off the MLS, the property is not distributed to other brokerage firms and other public sites, which could reduce the number of potential buyers who can learn about the property, the number of showings, the number of offers, and the final sales price. So they must be really great sales agents to convince a seller to sign an addendum saying they're going to implement a marketing strategy with all of these potential drawbacks. It's kind of like the pharmaceutical industry, when they're like, this drug will solve your problem, but also may cause suicide, diarrhea, like all these other side effects. And you're like, yeah, but it's going to cure my headache. I don't know. To me, it just seems like too big a price to pay for then the majority of those listings wanting to go live anyway, which you know is true, or else Compass wouldn't have its panties in a twist, right? The majority of their listings actually go on the MLS. Why? They don't sell on the private listing network, most of them. Okay. And that reminded me of the PLS. Do you remember the PLS? Did you guys ever hear of the PLS? It was the private listing service or something like that. Now it's called the NLS, the National Listing Service. This was created by a few guys from agency. I think Mauricio Mansky might have been involved. Definitely Christopher Dyson. So that PLS was supposed to create a nationwide pocket listing network. They got sued. It's currently engaged in an ongoing antitrust lawsuit against NAR regarding clear cooperation. PLS first filed the case in 2020, but it was subsequently paused, dismissed, and later refiled in July of 2025. So this is now. It's ongoing right now, following the U.S. Supreme Court's decision not to review NAR's appeal. The lawsuit claims that NAR's policy restricts competition and violates antitrust laws by disadvantaging private listing platforms like the PLS. It's a conundrum because on one hand, if you're going to have a private listing network, why not make it accessible to all agents? As in, if the objective of your private listing network is that the owner of the property doesn't want their house listed in the MLS, whether it's for days on market count, or maybe there's a tenant in the property that doesn't want to show it, you can't have open house, whatever the reasons are, right? Would it not more make sense to have something like the PLS where it's not brokerage specific? It's open to anyone who wants to market to other agents an off-market listing nationwide. So it's not specific to my MLS. It's not specific to the brokerage, but at least I can market my privately listed property to other real estate agents who may have a client for it. Doesn't that sound like a great compromise? Because the problem with Compass's advocacy for this is that it still only serves them, and it decentralizes our existing systems. If in the future we're going to have an open source MLS, then maybe some of these things will change, right? But this idea that we should go to selling real estate the way that it's done in New York City with exclusive agencies, or in Europe or the rest of the world, where it's very hard to find a property and there is no centralized anything. This idea of disassembling everything is not going to serve the consumer. It feels just like a power grab. It feels a little bit like an ego war, and I don't think it serves the client. So if your true intention is to allow your sellers to have choice in marketing, why not do something more like the National Listing Service, where it's nationwide, you can put your off market in there, all agents join it, and we all can see everyone's off markets without regard to who our brokerage is. And the reason why that can't happen is because NAR's clear cooperation is standing in the way. They need to get rid of that. They need to get rid of it. It would solve so many of these problems. On my next big story, Russ Cofano wrote an op-ed in Inman called NAR Membership Must Be a Choice for Agents, Brokers, and Consumers. I don't think NAR is soliciting consumers, so I don't know why he put that one in there. Here's the gist of it. Inman published this explosive op-ed by Russ Cofano arguing that mandatory NAR membership should end. The author's point is simple. He says you cannot build trust if membership is mandatory. He makes the case, like apparently he did in 2016, I didn't see it, that agents feel that paying this membership fee for city, state, and national association membership is like a tax. You can't do your job without paying it. They're like gatekeepers. So he says, and here are a few points from his op-ed, okay? He says, optional membership would make associations earn their dues, decrease the risk of antitrust accusations, which is a really great point, allow brokers and agents to negotiate value rather than accept terms by default, help with the public black eye that we've all experienced as a result of these lawsuits, and as a result of being lumped together as realtors, even when sometimes, for example, there's a podcast that recently was reviewing the DOJ cases against the real estate developers who were defrauding the government for their homelessness initiatives. and they called the developers realtors. In the headline of, it's a PBD podcast, in the headline of the podcast, they're like, California realtors. No, they weren't realtors. They were developers. But it's such a natural thing now to have this black eye be given to realtors. They can't even people who, it's like a Q-tip. It's like we've just gotten this generic reputation for being bad guys. Anyway, he says, if you had a few notes, he says, when you can't opt out, you become a captive rather than a customer. Okay. Well, that's true. I mean, that's what all these lawsuits are about. That's why NAR keeps finding itself in the middle of them. That's why clear cooperation continues to be a thorn in the side. At some point, NAR just has to admit that some policies they made and some things they did not work. What does it cost them to walk this back? How many more lawsuits do we have to go through? How many more lawsuits does NAR have to go through before they get the memo? Read the room, NAR. Nobody wants it. I shouldn't say nobody. There are some people who want it. Okay. So independent brokers are the ones who are more championing Russ Cofano's point of view. Here are his recommendations. He wants to separate access, like super keys. MLS membership is required for you to get a super key so you can access lock boxes and that kind of thing. And that's all through the MLS. He says separate those things. It should not be dependent on paying for association membership. In some places, I think that's already happening, like the decoupling of the MLS and Supra. But for most places, it's still totally integrated. Provide tiered or optional participation. Not every agent or broker needs the full suite of association services. Very good point. Great point. That is an excellent point. I'm a broker. I might need all the education stuff. I might need the full slate of association resources and advocacy, whereas a part-time agent might not. But this would require them to admit that they're charging too much, and it's actually discouraging probably very talented people from keeping their license or being in the business. And the broker billing policy. Unless a brokerage uses the realtor trademark in its name, the decision to join the association should be made by each agent, not mandated at the firm level. Now, I don't know if y'all know this, but if one of my agents at my company doesn't pay, like say they're having a rough month, they don't pay, or there's a delayed payment, they threaten to shut down our forms access for our entire brokerage. And it's a non-negotiable. It's a gunshot to the head. How can you have 35 people where if one person's having a rough month and can't pay, it shuts it down for the entire firm? That sounds mafia style to me. I mean, come on. That's the only way they can get their fees, though. And this is, many people are making the case that this is a for-profit situation, and they are not willing to back down from this oppressive billing structure. And, it's been the case that I've had to come out of pocket to pay just to keep our forms alive whenever some agent couldn't. Increase transparency with data. Publish information about membership exits and satisfaction. True choice requires visibility into who's leaving and why. Let's match transparency with real action. I do love this. I do love this idea, right? Like, don't you want to see, how many people have left the organization? What is their feedback? What are the pluses? What are the minuses? Let's get some people in here, talking out loud about the things that need improvement. And, that's not how it works right now. They say that's how it works. They say, join, get involved. No, you can't change it. It's a behemoth. Look how many lawsuits, how many millions of dollars we've spent, and still clear cooperation is a policy. It does not change it. Revamp governance and dues. Allow members to select and pay for only the services they find valuable, making dues more reflective of individual benefit. Great idea. Educate the profession. Help agents and brokers understand the tangible return on investment for membership and ensure there are credible, well-communicated alternatives for those who choose to opt out. Yes, there should be a pathway to realtorship for people who do not want to sign up to pay these association fees. We should still have access. And again, once MLS, kind of already with with platforms like Zillow and Redfin in certain areas, certainly, you pretty much have access to the MLS by just having access to Zillow, right? Everything else is relationship based. And I mean, of course, unless you're in the private listing network business, then maybe you got a little bit more. But for most agents, MLS is just, we just use it for contact information. There are other aggregator sites that do beautiful jobs with market data. You know, it's kind of becoming clearer and clearer as I discuss this and go into it. What do we need the MLS for? Why are we paying for it? Just for super access, because the listings are all kind of online. The comments section is where it's at, and all of these, what I always love, I live to and love to read the comments section. Jeffrey Bastris, this is me applauding the obvious. Thanks. Shutting off a whole office if one agent does not pay their dues is a threat and a ransom to fill their coffers any way they can. If so great, why mandated to join national, state, and local MLS? If it's so great, why mandated to join national, state, local, and MLS? Really? Also, as a broker, I'm required to be the DR in 14 local associations to support my agents in 4 states. Really? Why does a state even need local association? Not to mention why so many MLS systems needed in each state when one would serve a much better purpose for agents and clients. The answer is simple: greed. Christopher Dean responded, you're correct in that MLS consolidation is sorely needed. It is out of hand. You are also, unfortunately, an outlier case as well, so nobody will care. I care. I care, Jeffrey. I feel the same way. Why do we have so many MLSs in one state? Why not just have one MLS for the state? But why do we need MLS anyway when we can just get all of our listing information? I mean, listen, if the mandate is that we have to have our listings in the MLS so that it can be IDX to Zillow, etc., then Zillow is the MLS. That's it. And now that, according to Compass, Zillow is finding itself as a regulatory authority. Cool. But if we had the PLS as an alternative to the publicly listed stuff, then I think that covers all of our bases. All agents get to see all private listings, and the public gets to see the publicly listed listings. I just solved the problem. I just solved the problem. Somebody needs to pay me some money. I can lead this. Okay. Tim Mock says, I'm really torn on this policy. I must admit that I'm a big supporter of my local association, the NCR and the NAR, because I'm very involved and see all the good they do, especially when it comes to obtaining the support of elected officials to support causes important to homeowners and realtors. Hasn't worked in Los Angeles, has it? You seen those landlord-tenant rules lately? Didn't work in New York City either, although I think New York City doesn't have have a local association that way. Somebody prove me wrong. I don't know. I don't sell real estate in New York, but, you know, I think elected officials will vote whatever the people tell them is important to them. We can dump money into elected officials' pocketbooks, I guess, but should we have to? I mean, isn't it part of the American dream? Isn't home ownership supposed to be inherent in our elected officials' agenda? I would think so. What I would like to know, like, what policy advances actually have come out of our local associations for sure. Because in LA, it definitely feels like homeowners get the short end of the stick, particularly like mom and pop investment property owners. I mean, during COVID, I had an entire tenant, utilities included, furnished rental of my own. He didn't pay me for a year. And you cannot get the man out of the house. You cannot get him out. You can't. So who has to pay his rent? Me. I had to pay. I need that money. It's unfair. And a lot of people lost their houses. A lot of people lost their houses as a result of the COVID rules. So it's a dangerous thing to assume that just because you line elected officials' pockets, that you're going to get some policy outcome that supports homeowners. That's what I think. Okay. Christopher Dean, he writes, it's so obvious, but many realtors don't know what they don't know and are cheap, so they will not want to pay any dues. However, the agents will be the first to complain as companies' lawsuits and new legislation put them out of business later. We can all say NAR has done a horrible job of educating agents and the public on their value, which would be correct, but I fear what the landscape would look like without effective lobbying efforts, because NAR can no longer afford it since every agent doing 0 to 2 deals a year opts out of membership. So beware of unintended consequences. Did you hear my last story last week about how much money $1 billion was in NAR's bank account in 2022. $1 billion, a whole billion. Now they say it's 323 million, but do they need more? Do they need more of our money to do with what? I want to see where they're spending it and what the outcomes are. We need that transparency so we can see if it's effective or if this is just idealistic, like we just hope, we dream, we believe that our association is doing something that we ourselves could not. Not sure, because the outcomes this past couple of years have not been in our favor. We lost a lot of big lawsuits besides our public black eye, and now we have to deal with AI. NAR is so far behind the ball on how to educate its brokerages and its agents on anything other than pushing out poorly tested AI tools on its sites and things. I've seen it. I've tested it. I have a YouTube channel called Real Estate AI Coach, and I went through some of the ones that were being pumped through the MLSs and like Sidekick, like realestatecontent.ai. They are not fully ready for public consumption, and yet they are being marketed through our systems. I just feel like NAR doesn't have a handle on the future, and I'm not sure where the money is going to actually help us moving forward. They can't even get rid of this horrible policy. They can't admit they were wrong. It's crazy. Anyway, Philip Cantrell, when an association controls membership access and pricing, the risk mounts for members and the public alike. Exactly. This is what I've been pounding the table about for 2 years. As a result, I've been threatened for it, both overtly and behind the scenes. Why? Because the power players want to maintain their control and, more importantly, their revenue stream. The most dangerous phrase in any organization is because we've always done it that way. Those 7 words are the sound of slow decline. Failing to change these requirements will lead our industry back into the next round of lawsuits. Sitting on the sidelines will end your career. We must learn, we must adapt, and we must move forward toward in transparency and service to the consumer. Nothing else matters. Eyes ahead, no quitting. Boom. Mic drop, dude. Exactly. It's the consumer. It's our clients. We want to continue to be able to serve our clients well. When you weight us down with BS lawsuits and heavy taxes, as the association fees are, and threaten us with a gun to our head if we're having a difficult year and an agent can't pay, I don't think that helps. I don't think that's the advocacy that we've been looking for. Honestly, I don't. But Lahel, I don't know how to say his last name, SZUCS says, am I missing something? Being a realtor is a choice. Is it a choice? Is it? Okay. He says, there's a cost if you want to call yourself a realtor. The rules and costs are laid out to you before you join, and you get to make the choice. Being an MLS participant is a choice. There is a cost if you want to participate. The rules and costs are laid out to you before you join, and you get to make the choice. In California, you can be a licensed real estate salesperson and practice real estate-related activities and participate in the MLS without being a realtor. It costs me just under $1,000 a year to keep the title of realtor. Yeah, you think it's a choice. You feel like it should be a choice, but there are, and like I said, there are some states where they're trying to at least peel apart the access, like the super e-key. But I also have membership in Beaches MLS in South Florida. You have to be you have to be a member of Beaches to get access to the e-key there. So it's still very much tied together in certain states. And I don't think, I think we're headed in the direction of an MLS being optional. And when Parker Bryant from Housewell last week was talking about open source MLS, like a nationwide open source MLS, I can see it. Now, I was speaking with a very high profile real estate celebrity agent this week who said, yeah, but who polices it? Who polices it if we have an open source nationwide MLS? And I guess that's something that we would need to figure out, or something that would emerge. Maybe there's less quality control if it's done that way. Maybe. But, at the end of the day, as brokers and as agents, we do have an obligation to certain accuracy of listing data, right? So there would be legal implications there. I would think the liability would fall on the agent entering the data. From Jennifer Gilbert Smith, she says, I'm so glad you're speaking up about choice of association. Membership should reside at the agent level. I feel that all or none approach has eroded trust and some accountability within some associations. I could not agree more. And again, I'm just saying, it's not the associations don't do valuable work. When the wildfires happened, CAR was right there helping us. You know, I know some excellent people with really important jobs during crises that are specific to California, for example. And CAR is responsible in California for our forms, like in most states, like the forms are done by the state associations, right? However, it seems true to me that I don't really get any value out of the NAR membership. And for me, if I could just choose one, I'd choose the state. The local and the national, I don't really use. I don't need. It's the state. Because DRE is state. The forms are state. And if we had one statewide MLS, one state association, and the nationwide private listing service, I think we're good. I think we're good. If you like your real estate news and opinion with a little bit of extra spicy salsa, please hit the like button, comment below, subscribe, turn on your notifications, and help me get the word out about these important issues that are affecting our real estate professional lives every single gosh darn day. Okay? Thanks. Bye. Back to the show. The Consumer Policy Center, a watchdog, which I'm always very cautious whenever I hear anything from a watchdog. But anyway, says that commissions are still too hard to negotiate. I have to shed a fake tear. Let me do it the way that the mayoral candidate in New York did it. What do you mean? Real estate agents? Real estate agents are still charging fees that they feel are equivalent to their value, even though the buyer and seller have a choice? Yes. Why didn't anything change, Consumer Watchdog? I think it didn't change because commissions have always been negotiable. That's why. But let me get to the story. A federal watchdog report says buyers still struggle to negotiate lower commission rates. Even after the lawsuits, the settlements, the headlines, not much has changed. The sentence says buyer agents may have increased their commission rates as a hedge against the newfound ability of buyers and sellers to negotiate rates downward following the landmark settlement last year by the National Association of Realtors. That is factually incorrect. Buyers and sellers have always had the right to negotiate their rates. Let me break it down for you. Prior to the settlement, there was a document called an exclusive agency agreement. I know it didn't just exist in California because I used it in Washington, D.C. too. On that form, it actually says buyer agrees to pay buyer agent some percentage, and then the buyer agent could make a box that says which can be offset by the seller's offer of cooperating compensation. Right? So there's a rate in the exclusivity agreement. But the thing is, in California, nobody used those except a few brokerages, one of which was mine. But, you know, there were a lot of agents who did not use that agreement. Had they just used that agreement, then, you know, you could see that it was, that it was always in there. Otherwise, the default was they just accept whatever the seller was offering in the MLS. Okay, so that's it. So all the buyer agent was doing is saying, I'll accept whatever the seller's offer of cooperating commission is. That was the only impact of them not having their buyer client sign this exclusivity agreement with regard to commission. Okay, and then sellers. When you sit down with a seller, you go over your marketing plan, you talk about your track record, you explain what it is that makes you different than someone else. You show them the listing agreement, you go through it, and you tell them what your rate is. That has not changed. And if you are an agent and in the real world, you sit down with sellers, they say to you, well, I just interviewed another agent. He was willing to do the same scope of work for XYZ. Would you do that? And then the agent will say, no, I wouldn't do it for that. I've been on those listing presentations and I've said, no, we're not a discount brokerage. I'm not a discount agent. I'm not doing it for that. And they can move on and find another agent who would. That's always been the case. For 20 years of my real estate sales career, negotiations on commissions have always empowered buyers and sellers to choose whatever they want to pay. And I'm specifically talking about those buyer exclusivity agreements which existed before the NAR settlement. So that headline suggests that buyers and sellers could not negotiate prior to the settlement. So that already is bullshit. Then it says buyer agents may have increased their commission. The new documents that we have to sign now are even a little bit more limiting than the previous ones, because what it says in the new document as a result of the settlement is that we can't, as a buyer agent, adjust our commission up, only down. So some agents are writing into their buyer agency commission agreements a little bit higher price to buffer that. Some agents are, and they're willing to move it down if that's what's negotiated to a certain point, at which part the buyer will kick in. That's all on the paper. But what it prevents people from doing, like developers that I work for who want to incentivize buyer agents, it prevents them from being able to say $5,000 bonus to the buyer agent, or, really marketing any kind of incentive or increased buyer agency fee. So in that way, it does restrict the seller's ability to market, in my opinion. But after that powerful first line, that bullshit first line, the article concedes that commission rates have, quote unquote, largely remained unchanged. A senior fellow, Stephen Brobeck at the Consumer Policy Center, accuses the industry of, quote, figuring out how to minimize the opportunities for clients to negotiate. How would we figure that out? How do we figure that out? That doesn't even make logical sense. We as an industry, a local group of realtors, we do not sit around talking about commissions. We don't. We've been trained not to from the very beginning. We don't. Or I should say, the people I know don't. Of course, we all talked about the lawsuits, but as far as setting something that we can then induce upon the civilization, that's ridiculous. We are not organized enough to even figure out sometimes how many showings we can do in a day without being late to pick up the kids, let alone masterminding some group think around how we're gonna outsmart the entire. No, that's just bullshit. Accuses the industry of figuring out how to minimize opportunities for clients to negotiate. No. Until these so-called consumer advocates acknowledge and realize that our profession is a service, just like a graphic designer, just like a videographer, a hired contractor, a lawyer, a doctor, they have rates for their work. And I'm not going to let some consumer supposed watchdog tell me that the work that I do is less valuable than my very client is willing to pay. That's our market, is what is the client willing to pay for a person who has 20 years experience selling real estate? That's what I'm going to charge. And at the point where I stop setting my rates and buyers are like, I can't pay that, then maybe it will come down. But why? The way that our market works is that if I'm charging too much, my clients will move on to a different agent. And if that starts to impact my ability to do business, then I have choices to make. That is true in every profession. We are no exception. Except some professions don't have whole supposed consumer watchdog organizations really saying that we are trying to dupe our clients. Guess who our bread and butter is? Guess who we try to satisfy? Guess who we open the doors for, open our cell phones for at dinner? It's for our clients. We want them to be happy. That's how we make our business run. That's how we are able to stay alive in this highly competitive industry. So the idea that the client satisfaction would not be at the forefront of our decision-making is ridiculous. We are not con artists. We are professionals with an expertise. And I wish so-called consumer watchdog groups would get the memo. In fact, I think we should turn the tables on them. What makes them qualified? Like maybe their profession is a scam. Maybe they're charging some government, whoever hires them, too much for what it is they do. Maybe this Stephen Brobeck should consider taking a pay cut because his opinions are poorly sourced, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. We're not entry-level workers. We are not entry-level per hour workers who don't have expertise in a profession. We are professionals, and these types of articles may convince certain consumers that we are overcharging, which is not fair. We are charging the rate our clients are willing to pay us and for which we will accept for a professional service. I think they need to remember that we come into the situation justifying our ask. We come in defending our value, proving our track record. So taking this question out of context, I presume, the article says, quote, several agents said they were charging the standard or usual rate in their area, evidence of price fixing. That's not price fixing. Price fixing is when people get together and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. Nobody's doing that. This is the market speaking to what the clients are willing to pay. And if that all falls within a range, that would make sense. That would make sense because the clients are telling us what our competition is charging. And we get to decide, are we willing to match that? Do we charge more because we offer more? Whatever. That's called a market. A market. Would you say there's a market price for eggs? Like, is there a market range? Like you get the organic, farm-raised, pasture, farm, whatever, free range, everything. And they're $7.99. And then you can get the like industry produced, the chickens are poking each other's eyes out, but you don't care. It's like $3.99, right? There's a range. Lower than that, doesn't make sense. Higher than that, clients won't pay. So are we all sort of aware of the range? Of course. And some discount services do charge lower rates. The client has the right to choose. That's it. But there is this assertion, again, of price fixing supposes that there is a group of us together really trying to control the outcome in a particular area, which I just think is not true. It's simply not true. This article has them complaining that there is no enforcement mechanism. No enforcement mechanism for what? What is the crime that we are committing? Negotiating our fees? I'm sorry, but that is the case in all professional services. This is ridiculous. And also, consumers are not children. Our home buyers and sellers are not children. They can read the contract and they can make their own decision. And I think this consumer watchdog group is drinking a little too much of its own Kool-Aid because the failed logic of the lawsuit that's caused all these changes is that somehow somebody was being duped. But no, it's all in the contract. It's all there. And mutual parties agreed to it. Some lawyers convinced some people that they could get a little extra money out of this. That's my thought. Because if you look at the actual logic and reasoning, it presumes that consumers that are just like children, like they just don't understand the written word. They don't know what they're selling. I hold my clients to a higher esteem than that. And I think that most homeowners are smarter than that. Anyway, then he wraps with this part. I'll close with this. Then this part. If buyers could finance their agent's commission, the researchers said, home prices would fall. Yeah? What do you think was happening before whenever the seller paid commission out of their proceeds to the buyer's agent? Oh, the buyer was financing the commission. Yeah, the buyer was financing the buyer agent commission through an increased sales price. That was the accusation that was actually in the lawsuit, right? That was the whole thing, right? Causing home prices to rise? I'm sorry. This article is just nonsense. I'll leave a link to it. I would love your opinions. Finally, shifting into last year, I'd love to leave you guys with a little tech tool. You know, I love/hate AI, but AutoReel app has come a long way. So AutoReel app takes your photos from your listing and turns it into a very smooth, beautiful reel for social. You can do quite a bit inside the app now. They have this new feature where you can add fire to a fireplace. You can add AI features like a hummingbird, or, you know, you can change the color of the sky. You can add a teapot with smoke. AutoReel app is worth a look. It could save you a lot of money on those videos that you've been outsourcing and waiting forever for. I'm going to include a little discount code in the comments section, so be sure to check that out, or the show notes section rather. Yeah, I think you should. Here's my conclusion, without getting political, okay? New York City has a new mayor. It's what everybody's talking about. And the headlines say that real estate is bracing for impact. Developers are panicking. Some people are supposedly fleeing. Tenant advocates are celebrating. And brokers are rewriting their listing scripts. But one of the oldest truths in our business is location, location, location. And when it comes to location, New York City will always be prime real estate. Earlier this week, when I was talking to a New York City agent about the impact of this outcome, he said, you know what? That's when the best deals can be found. And so the silver lining of this all is where there is crisis, there's also opportunity. And so we need to all be out there in the field looking for where we can find our silver lining, because this real estate market is on fire, but it's always good for someone. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of The Clean Close. I'm Courtney Polis, and I'll see you every Friday, same time, same place. Toodles.